Round two. Yeah. Let's raise your knot. Go ahead. I'll go ahead and introduce you. Hey, welcome. Hey, Miss Dr. Hammer. Dr. Lewis, Professor. Good to see you. I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Tani Barlow, the director of the Chow Center, and the title of her presentation is The Nakayama and Club Cosmetics Manchurian Girl Icon.
Thank you very much. I feel a little bit like the odd person out today because I'm a historian and I've been working on turn of the 20th century era. So 1890s to 1937, basically. So today I thought I would review some of the research that I've been doing on a book project called In the Event of Women. And overall, the book looks at how the commercial landscape, particularly the advertising agency and the advertisement campaigns, created the possibility for a historically new kind of woman to step forward. So in the book project itself, I look at both the lay sociology or modernist forms of thinking about society and social theory, which saturated the intellectual life of people at the turn of the 20th century, and I connect that to the advertising industry, and particularly to collecting and interpreting advertising campaigns. Now, what surprised me about this research when I first began to do it is how complex and intricate and sophisticated advertising campaigns were in the period, say, of 1902 or 1903. And I'll mention a couple of the reasons why I think that's the case. But my remarks today are structured around a series of images. These images are taken from major newspaper media in Shanghai, Tianjin, and in Northeast China. I'm going to refer to Northeast China as Manchuria, although I know very well that Manchuria is a political fiction. But today my emphasis is going to be on corporations and advertising campaigns that originated in Japan with Japanese corporations and Japanese artists, Japanese advertising executives. And that's why I was so interested in Hongmei Li's information about the ambivalence that people feel about Japanese advertising in public spaces, and yet they continue to buy Japanese goods because they are allegedly superior. I want to warn you that the images that I show in this are very pretty. And if you just look at what I'm going to show you, you would think that China during this time in these three areas was filled with very glamorous images and was a very beautiful place. So I give you this image to begin with to keep you reminded that these images appear in newspapers. So you open the newspaper and you see this, basically. If you are a constant newspaper reader, you will notice those ads very vividly, day after day after day, because there will be micro changes. In this period of advertising history, the micro change was a way of drawing attention to the continuity and yet the changing and update and excitement of buying new commodities. So please keep in mind that these beautiful images appeared in just plain old ordinary newsprint, and that's what sort of ties our projects together is this sense of the everyday and ephemera, things that weren't expected to really survive. I believe that this is commercial art, but not everybody would agree with me that it is art. I'll put the accent on the commercial because these are advertising was the way that newspapers during this era made money. Now, the slides that I'll show today look at two things most. One is the process of iconization. That is to say, we are now very familiar with the head of a pretty girl in 1979 and a new product. We're very familiar with that constellation of pretty girl and commodity. But one of the things that I've discovered through my research is how much work it took to create icons and to put the iconic girl with the product. So one emphasis with this work is simply to show how much planning and how much work went into creating an identifiable set of icons, or one icon in particular. These are modern girl icons, and they associate a girl image with a commodity, as we'll see. Now, all corporations that advertised in China during the period that interests me conducted efforts to create girl icons. That's what they all have in common. I've done a great deal of work on the American advertiser, a Shanghai advertiser, Carl Crow, and we'll see some of the images that led him. I want to stress that this was not a Japanese plot, that the Japanese were not the only corporate owners and advertisers who created icons, and that all major international companies were doing pretty much the same thing. I've worked fairly extensively with the British company ICI, Imperial Chemicals, or Brunner Mohn Corporation, which did the very same thing. So my point here is that although we'll look at a lot of Japanese iconic girls today, please understand that this is just one way of approaching this material. Now, the larger significance of these arguments, as I mentioned before, is the thesis of the book, which is that these advertising patterns allow a new form of womanhood, one deeply, deeply rooted in commercial culture, to step forward as the modern woman. Okay, so let's take a look. On February 11th, 1893, Osaka entrepreneur, capitalist, and civilized Mencius-style humanitarian Morishita Hiroshi founded Morishita Nanyodo, the corporation that would create and market Jintan, magical pills, the first in China and then around the world. Beyond the profit motive, Morishita sought to establish a superior quality herbal tonic medicine, amass foreign currency, and make the world a better place through advertising. Eventually, campaigns for the Jintan Project straddled the globe, from South America to Thailand, Singapore, and the Philippines, to Abyssinia and Uganda. Now, this is a characteristic of Japanese Osaka merchant companies, that they had global ambition. While Morishita's signature products were still a syphilis tonic called dokumetsu and condoms sold to Japanese troops in Taiwan, a pioneering tailorist, industrialist, cultural innovator, savvy advertising entrepreneur, Nakayama Taiichi also founded a retail network near Osaka, selling soaps, hygiene items, and other modern imported products. I have written at length about this corporation as well. Suffice it to say here that Nakayama and Morishita were key members of the Osaka medium-sized corporate group that thought about and conducted advertising media on the China mainland. In 1938, when the Japanese state established the Yen Zone in its Asia empire, including in the fictive legal entity called Manchuria, Nakayama, whose family were right-wing Buddhist sectarians, set up tailorist, cosmetics, and soap factories in Shenyang, Tianjin, Shanghai, and in Busan, Korea, which Japan had annexed in 1910. Medium-sized Japanese corporations used the service of densu. Those of you in the advertising study business, you know Dentsu very well. An advertising company which now has the largest market share of all advertising companies in Japan, was founded in 1901 by Mitsunaga Hoshido, who was also an Osaka native and former journalist. The importance of Dentsu for today's presentation is that Dentsu advertising agency appears to have placed the ads for the Osaka group's advertising campaigns. Because one of the big questions for this era is, how did the planned campaigns get into the newspapers on the China mainland? And it appears that Dentsu was one of the intermediaries for Osaka. Japanese corporate advertisers and academic intellectuals thought inside the British, American, Chinese, and Japanese-owned newspapers in China, such as Shangjing Shibao, accepted ads from Dentsu, as well as ads from Chinese advertising agents in Shanghai, and people like American, Japanese, British, French, and Russian advertisers who set up offices in Shanghai to sell multi-language advertising in multi-language newspaper venues. So in this set of images, the Chinese language Shangjing Shibao figures very heavily. But remember that just because it was Japanese owned doesn't really mean anything much. It was actually a very good newspaper. It accepted ads from corporate advertisers all over the globe. It did not actually give a Japanese slant on all news. It was a legitimate newspaper and is of good use for historians. But it did make an implicit argument that Japanese products are better than other products, and you should buy them rather than the other one, and that Japanese society was more sophisticated and emulatable than Shanghai. Okay. Japanese corporate advertisers and academic intellectuals thought inside the larger international project of commercial capital and colonial modernity. The corporations and individuals I've just mentioned sought from the outset to streamline corporate colonization of Asia. They rationalized labor practices and suppressed worker discontent, created surplus value, stabilized the business firm structure, accumulated capital, imagined consumer markets at home and in the colonies, and sought in every way possible to make capital more efficient. Let's see, where's number 3? Okay. Let me talk you through some of these, some of the issues surrounding iconization. I'm going to start here with the most familiar of all. This is not a Japanese corporation. This is a Shanghai ad placed by an American advertiser who became a Shanghailander. And I'm going to click through this fairly quickly because I'm not going to actually talk about his corporate structure, but I want you to see how an icon is constructed. This was an earth-shattering newspaper ad. It appeared in 1920, and it was the first of its size, and it was the first to put together the girl, the mirror, and the commodity. Now, this is a pretty mundane ad, but on the strength of this ad, Crow began to invent other ads which used the same basic iconic setup: the mirror, the girl, and the product. This one is very, very beautiful, right? This one is really lovely, but it's got the same topic, the same basic structure. This is identifiably both a Shanghai ad and a Crow ad. And notice, because that's Carl Crow's mark, so we know for sure this ad came from his studio. This is the great thing about ads, is somebody made them. Somebody not only made money on them, but actually crafted them. And we know this is from Carl Crow's studio. Now, we also know internally, once you know that this is a Shanghai vanity table. It only appears in Shanghai crafted ads, or mostly it's an indicator of that origin. In the end, the iconic girl who emerges out of the Crow formation And sort of the advertising industry of Shanghai itself looks like this. Now, those of you who read Chinese, please read quickly, because you'll note that there's a social science component to this ad as well. She is advertising not just products at Sincere Department Store, she is also advertising social evolution. So the more products you consume, the better, the implication is the Chinese race, but certainly the Chinese society will improve. And the girl is the iconic representation of that desire. Now, she's also somebody you can emulate, right? I mean, you can, like my mother-in-law did, wear a qipao that looks just like this. And you can buy hygienic products like her. So she's both something that was created in artist studios and marketed in a newspaper, but she also is a model for other women to emulate. Okay, so the iconic process is actually quite complex. Now, she's deployed in many different ways, and I happen to have lots and lots of these sophisticated slides, so I threw this one in. My level of sophistication with the Japanese ads is not yet as high, but you can see that once this starts floating around, it becomes, you know, inescapable. And I did a set of slides or pictures immediately after the war was over and Japan Japan evacuated Shanghai. The real estate market began to boom again, and this girl product icon exactly before 1937 reappears almost immediately. So it's really, really strong part of the advertising industry in Shanghai. All right, let me move now to the actual Japanese advertising icons. This, of course, is the Jintan General. It was claimed at the time that this iconic picture was put together, that this person, who will appear in just about every, one sees this image of this guy in every advertisement for this product. But he's not a general. He's allegedly a diplomat, because the product that he's advertising is a tonic. It's for a pill that makes your, improves your health. Because it's medicine, the founder argued, therefore diplomat was a better term. We know that this same advertiser also used Bismarck as a model for many of these styles of icons. So I have my doubts about this explanation myself. I think it's a general. But the company story is that this is a diplomat. Let's see, I had something else I wanted to, Now, this advertisement, or this icon, was drawn up around 1903. It didn't become a huge campaign for another couple of years, but the planning to create just this part of the icon was established very, very early, and the Osaka Corporation started thinking about how it was going to develop and design this guy, but also how they were going to place it in the surge of advertising that came out with this guy's image on it over the next 30 years. So a lot of registering of trademarks, of drawing and redrawing the designs, and of thinking through how to make this a charming and elegant, iconic figure was present in both the period right after 1895 and beginning in the early 1910s. There was a lot of concentrated effort on this. Now, please keep in mind that as this design is being worked out, Japanese advertising executives, artists, and theorists were reading social science advertising theory, as were advertisers in Shanghai. So the global aspect of this is that they're actually scientifically formulating these advertisements on the basis of advertisement theory like those of Iseki Jujiro, Walter Dill Scott, Hollingworth, Poffenberg, and Tipper, who was a great favorite in Shanghai. Harry Tipper was a Texaco advertising artist who wrote The Principles of Advertising, which was incredibly influential in the Shanghai market. Okay. Also during this time, Japanese advertisers were reading each other, and they were debating whether advertising like this was an art, first of all. It was in the sense that artists were drawing these ads. It's a very beautiful drawing. But they were also asking whether the science of advertising was a social science. And the argument there was yes, in the end. It is a social science. And I raise this issue both generally and specifically because in the Japanese setting, there was a great concern that these ads would be over-emotionalized. There had been a belief among Japanese advertising theorists that to appeal to consumers, particularly in the China market, where, of course, there was tension between China and Japan, that the advertisements must have a figure in them which appealed to the senses and to the emotions. And immediately, the answer to that question was put women in the ads. So I have read numerous theories now by Japanese observers, both in China and outside, which argue that some emotion has to be placed into these advertisements. Usually that should be associated with a girl image, and that enthusiasm will create a situation where the consumer, even if she or he is not literate, will be able to choose one brand over another brand in a period when all the brands were pretty much the same. Okay. Now, not all of the advertisements have girls in them, and I show you this one because this is an advertisement of an advertisement, right? This one is actually the world's largest billboard, which actually was built. This is just sort of a social group around this large city wall. But behind the large city wall, when you go into, I've actually read about this, so I'm not making it up, really, I'm not. You go in here and straight back, and you see there's the Jintan diplomat in the back. And when the Japanese occupied Shanghai, they got together the Navy, and they gathered some Chinese labor, and they actually built this. So it was the largest billboard in Asia at that moment. Okay. But mostly, these advertisements had to do with girls and the things that girls like. Let's go back to take another look at this one. Jintan always used pretty much the same slogan. Jintan brings you back from the dead, and it is second to none in the entire world. Use this miraculous medicine regularly. And then Osaka Morishita Apothecary. And then in a classical Chinese text, and I hope that Professor Chen will be able to help me again on this, I think this is classical Chinese that the Japanese advertisers made up. And so my translation goes, enjoying fortune is the most important key, passes the test for highest quality and given full-throated praise. In a smaller font, a statement, those who support the Jintan life are those who conquer fate, maybe. One dose is like a first starlight falling on the wet soil. No, I don't know about that one. Invalids. There will be consultations. Invalids. To become healthy, to become strong. Do it with Jintan, and you will no doubt startle heaven and rock the earth. Above the box of Jintan product, near the electric light, there is a slogan that reads, if books provide the framework that shapes our views, Jintan is the drug that intensifies and focuses that objective. Now, the important thing, of course, is the girl image, right? Intensely focused on her selfhood in relation to literacy, electricity, and this strange product. Now, here it looks like bowling balls, right? Or large oranges or grapefruit. Actually, Jintan is tiny. It's like a BB shell. So she's gazing into the mirror of the product This is just a little box, but they were fantastic. They sold like crazy. This company made a lot of money on ads like this for a product which actually didn't cure disease at all, but did freshen your breath. Okay. This kind of girl is what the historian Zhao Shen calls a new wave woman. And he believes that this kind of drawing not only sold product, but that it transformed the visual conventions of Chinese drawn art. That it posed a huge challenge to classical pictorial drawing, that style of art, and that the kind of young woman who appears here really was so shockingly new that people gravitated to it for its shock value. Despite the fact that the way she's dressed, if you cast your mind back to the Shanghai images, the way she's dressed to be modern is not sexy. This is not a sexy girl, but she is a modern girl, right? Okay. Now, since I don't have all the time in the world, I want to move us to the second Japanese Osaka-based corporation, and this is Nakayama Kyoto. This one, we're going to see again how the, how am I doing for time? 10 minutes, good. How the iconization project worked, because in this case, we don't have a diplomat, a male figure, but absolutely female figure. Now, the Nakayama, who founded this company, was himself, as Morishita was, very interested in advertising theory, in Taylorism, in social sciences of all kinds, and in branding and trademark theory. This is the first trademark that he established when he established his corporation and finally made some money on Club Araiko washing powder. This advertisement gives you the double flower head, which will continue throughout all of the advertising all over the world and is still the product's icon. There are stories that we can go into about why it was a double head, but this is the first iteration of it. I'm going to show you quite a number of other iterations, but I do want to tell you that unlike the Jintan Corporation, Mr. Nakayama believed that every product that was sold to illiterate markets had to have more than one sign. There had to be more than one icon. So he developed also a railway map. This is a product map. Instead of railway stops, these are the products that Nakayama sells. But you can see why the association of trains in Manchuria might be something that a Japanese corporate advertiser would come up with. The train being built by the Japanese corporations was creating a modern, fictive but modern nation state in China's periphery. Now, although they knew where they wanted to go, Nakayama tried field testing. They had theories, but they need to field test their ads to make sure that they were effective. And this is an ad that Professor Chen helped me with. This is actually Mei Lanfang. These are two men masquerading as women because they're opera players. And we know from other historical research that the whole notion of what a woman was at that time was rather confused, because for public presentation, it had been operatic femininity that was publicly available and acceptable rather than organic or biological femininity. It seems that this ad was absolutely a failure because it never appeared again after a certain very, very short time. And the company moved over very quickly to cartoons. Now, this gives you a similar ethnicity, right? The girl is ethnicized, so she's not really Han looking. I'm arguing that this is a Manchurian girl, and that this is allegedly a Manchurian outfit she's wearing, very, very high collar, rather padded looking garment, and this strange hairdo. There were many, many of these. "这个是这个" was also joined in this blast of advertising with "谁," right? So now these are lively. You can see why, if you're a viewer, I mean, even if you're not a modern viewer, would you rather look at that or this? Oh, come back. This one. Now, the funny thing about advertising cartoons is that they're actually more universal than photographs. So it's my contention that Nakayama and many other corporations actually lost the advertising, the photographs, not because they were too expensive, but because they were ineffective. And these little drawings were much more effective. So, although they did from time to time use other possibilities, this ad appeared fairly regularly in the Japanese language press. They mostly stuck to cartoons for the Chinese language press. And you can see pieces of this image here comes actually out of Mantetsu, the railway company, famous advertisings of this era. This is sort of a riff on those more well-known images. The point being here that these all have girls in them. They're all cartoon or drawn images. So they catch your attention. They focus it on both a girl image and a product. They make minor changes both to the layout and to the prose inside the advertisements themselves, and they burn themselves into your imagination through constant repetition. When you do research of this kind, I would get very excited because I'd be flipping through newspapers. I'd do, one day a week for years and years and years. And as soon as a new slight change in the ad appeared, it was almost like I was getting a new friend. It was almost as if there was a theory of movement encoded into the campaign itself that would allow us both continuity and change. In Shanghai, where things were even more sophisticated, the movement in campaigns put girls into whole different scenes. So we could get an advertising arc of maybe 40 different scenes, which really is a kind of movement and development of the story. But I wanted to really focus in on the Japanese side of this, where the ads are sophisticated, but not quite as sophisticated as Carl Crow. Okay. Here's one that puts a picture as well as a drawn element. The continuity here always is the double flower head, and I'm showing you a broad range of ads that came from this long period, so that you can see both the variety that's possible. This is one of my favorites. The variety, but also I'd like to draw your attention to the conservatism of the girls' outfits. Compared to the Shanghai Sincere department store ad of the sexy woman looking at her cosmetics, these are very demure. These are not really very lively. This woman finally, at the end of this campaign, has a bobbed hair, which, of course, in the larger cities was standard. But this is very late in the game. So for the most part, Manchurian-based advertising used a long-haired woman, and these are very, very, very late. Okay. Now, oh, sorry. In the Manchurian campaigns, both Osaka companies that I've introduced today had global ambition. you can see this both in the iconography of this kind of advertising, and both of them had this sort of we serve the world mentality. But we can also see it most clearly in the Jintan campaigns, because not only did Jintan focus in pretty tightly on girls and commodities, they also gave lots and lots of attention to sociological categories, which placed people in modernist categorical formations. What do I mean by that? I mean, instead of just giving, say, a family scene, children and parents and so on, or an extended family with some women in seclusion and that sort of thing. These advertisements actually did exist. The Japanese style was to divide people into races, nationalities, and classes explicitly. So, for example, we get a global kind of bow to the superiority of the Japanese product here, and remember they're advertising this product all over the world, and very, very obviously here. Now in this advertisement, the Jintan diplomat is receiving the peoples of the world. These are the various races and ethnicities of the world. Jintan sold its product by giving the product to the seller and then returning the next year to find out how much of the product had been sold. And then the seller paid only for the product that had sold. Even that way, they made money. But it meant that once a year, the Jintan people showed up and renewed your stock. And they're celebrating New Year's as that moment when the new medicine goes out and the new year begins for all of the Anglo-Americans, the Koreans, the Indians, the Chinese, the Africans, the English, the Turks, the Europeans, and the American Indians. One last thought on the American Indians. The discussion of how Indians operated in the United States was a favorite topic of popular sociology in China and Japan. And in the popular sociology, which talked about how society is formed, there was usually a reference to anthropological theories and almost always a reference to the Iroquois, because the Iroquois was a metonymy of the American Indian situation, and therefore of the evolution of primitive society into sophisticated societies like Anglo-American society, and from the primitivity of Chinese into the civilization, the modern civilization of the China of the future. Thank you very much.
Time for some questions?
I really enjoy your interesting presentation. Since I'm from China, I still need your full explanation because it seems that most of the advertisements from one company.
Yes.
And in some of it, we can easily tell it's a Japan brand.
That's right.
Japan brand. But,
Yes.
still some of them, I guess it's only, say Chinese character on it. And do you think when the people they buy these products, the Chinese people they really think they're buying our products from Japan?
Well, that's a good question. That's a very good question. The evidence is mixed. The evidence is that this product was incredibly popular, the Jintan product, and that people believe that it really did improve your health.
Mm-hmm.
They seem to associate it with the Japanese army.
Mm-hmm.
Because the Japanese army would always say, wherever we go to invade somewhere, we already see Jintan is already there. Sometimes labor contracts were fulfilled with payments of Jintan product. So the distance between these corporations and the Japanese colonizing project is not at all clear to me yet. I think probably if they didn't know it before, they did know it after, that this was a Japanese product, and they bought it anyway. Yeah. The obvious contradiction I'm raising for our discussion is why? We know that boycotts of Japanese goods went on all the time, and particularly in cities. But we know that even in this period, even in cities, people went back to buying Japanese goods anyway. Even leading intellectuals did the same thing. So the nationalism of products and the actual market where people buy things seem to be on two different trajectories.
Mhm.
Am I addressing your question in any way? A little bit.
Actually, I think how to say it, because this special periods in Chinese history, I think it couldn't split it with the communism and the nationalism.
Oh,
We did
yeah.
have at this time because if we study the luxury brands, all
Mhm.
we're spreading the China market. You can see the U.S. company and the Euro company and the Japan companies, they do have a little totally different strategies when they want to enter in the China market. Sometimes people, they do know they're using our U.S. brand.
Mhm.
Sometimes they totally no sense about what it. Maybe it's a local brand.
Well, it's also complicated by the practice of trademarking. And my evidence is that corporations that were associated with nations often chose advertising images that were not associated with their nation. So we find many trademarked Japanese goods using Caucasian youngsters to advertise. Chinese images were used by Swiss corporations very broadly. One even tried to trademark the story of Mencius and his mother. So how nationalism worked in commercial capitalism is pretty complicated.
Yes.
And I think that's what we're looking at here.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I just wonder, yeah, I really like your presentation. It was really wonderful. I just wonder if this product had any kind of competitors, a Chinese product.
Yes, they did. And there's been a wonderful book written about this. There was, what was it called? It was called Ren. There was a Chinese product that was almost exactly like this, and founded by a Chinese guy, and it was a complete failure. People just wouldn't buy it.
But did you also look at the advertising strategies of the Chinese product?
Yes, yes. It's been studied by, what's his name? Our friend at Cornell.
Oh, Sherm Cochran.
Sherm Cochran. Sherm Cochran's written a whole chapter on the Chinese product, and he looks at the advertising strategy, at everything about this failed Chinese product. I found the same thing with Brunner Monde. Brunner Monde sold chemical fertilizers and chemical salts. And there was a national Chinese product that was its competitor for market share. But the extraordinary part of that story is that in order to get market share, the Chinese company had to sell in Japan. So it was a nationalist company. It slowly increased market share, but it was primarily serving Japanese needs. Yeah. Yeah.
Can we go back to the
Yes.
favorite?
Yes. Yes. Thank you. Thank you. Yes. Come on now. Why are we not going faster? Yeah.
Yeah, this way. I have one question and two comments. Although the classical part I can see, is that the small one? It's you said classical Chinese, the Japanese made classical Chinese.
Well, I don't know. That's my.
Yeah, that's what,
Yeah.
cannot see, it's too small.
Okay.
But I think the comments, two comments. One comment is the middle part, 享福第一要素, and then the whole thing.
Yes.
That was so interestingly made to tell people if we eat it, from ill to healthy, then to strong, and then to hegemonic. That is very appealing to China's status back then. And given this kind of instruction to a girl, has an even more stronger message here. That's my comment.
As soon as your other comment is over, we'll go back to we can go back to it now. Compare it with this one.
There's a man.
That's a man, right?
This is a guy, and he's weak, and he's degenerate, and the only reason he got to these Jintan tablets was that at least he has the energy to read a newspaper, and he found this ad. This is classic, sick man of Asia and vibrant woman of the future.
That's right. And the second comment is this guy, the beard, the mustache guy, actually started a fashion for male in China. Because I grew up knowing that 人丹虎, Jintan mustache. Yes.
So Lu Xun's my mustache.
Yeah, that's called 人丹虎.
Oh, yeah.
And then the question, can we go back?
Yes. Amazing.
What's written on the 2 pages? I'm wondering, because that looks the English.
Jintan book.
It's English.
It's English.
Right? So it's a Jintan
Book.
book.
Yeah.
And what about
What
this
is she
side?
writing?
This side, she's writing Jintan book, Jintan book.
Oh,
Oh, in
yes.
Chinese,
In
In
English.
English.
Yeah.
I thought, well, actually they could do a better job to write some other things there, but it's all right.
I think it's interesting that unlike the boy, she's got light. I'm interpreting this as a library full of books that only say Jintan. This looks like a library study area, or maybe it's her own study, I don't know. But obviously she's a strong, vibrant, modern Chinese young woman who can do English. Too, on top of everything else.
And did you compare the ads that they use in China with the ads in Japan?
This is the ad that's used in China.
I mean, did you compare the ads that they use in
same
China
same
and
company
in
used in
Japan?
Japan.
Yes, I've seen some of them, not as many, of course. They are, this particular brand always put things that were newsworthy in their ads. So they had images of a nuclear family going for a walk under the, cherry blossoms. They had military victories would involve home ads for this. Those are some of the ones that I remember. What I'd like to see are the ones from India or Korea and see how they did it. Because we know that Flit, the DDT product for killing bugs, Flit was also, it was an American corporation, but it advertised equally all over the world in very, very similar way, changing the language and slightly altering the text, but keeping the iconic figure and focusing in on women.
Can you tell us what the meaning of the double flower, the double-headed flower, girls?
Yeah, the story is, the corporate story is that during the time they were thinking about putting this brand together, there was a princess who wore this kind of a hat, Japanese modernizing princess, and she wore this kind of hat. And so they liked that image, and they sort of abstracted and universalized it. But then Nakayama himself believed that that you should have never one single thing. You should always put two together, because two is a crowd, and so it's happier. So he put the two flower heads together, and that became Any other questions or comments? Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you, our presenters, already for a very informative morning, and perhaps you can continue over lunch some of the discussions. So please join us out in the Commons for a buffet. I also note that feel free. Several students noticed that we printed out a really nice poster. You may have seen the small flyer, but we printed out the big posters as well, and so we've been giving them away. So if you'd like to have a poster, feel free to take one. Circulate, advertise. Yeah, you got it. Okay.